I love a good quote. There are few things that can be said today that haven't already been said by someone else, most of whom were wiser and more eloquent than me. A favourite of mine and a repeat offender on this podcast is Blaise Pascal, the 16th century philosopher, who said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." It seems that being alone with ourselves, getting quiet and seeing what might come out of our own internal and dreaded lucky dip, is something that we have collectively built a whole world around avoiding. Whether it's our iPhones, our television news, the internet and social media, our daily gossip, our indulgence in the pleasures of instant gratification, or our latest political scandals, we have built impossibly high walls of distraction to protect ourselves from the uncomfortable messages that we might hear if we just took the time to listen to the rushing waters that flow inside us. As Nietzsche said, if you gaze for long into the abyss gazes into you. It sounds terrifying, but maybe finding the courage to face that terror is exactly what we need to actualise who we really are and become who we came here to be. As we're on a quote trip already, I'd like to offer another favourite, this time from Joseph Campbell, and echoing thousands of years of wisdom from the Tao, from Zen, from the Stoics. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. I'm Chris Brock, and this is Conversations on Living, a podcast about being and being better. Indeed, it was formerly titled Being Better, a name I'm starting to miss, if I'm completely honest. And it's all about finding our place, our peace and our purpose in the world, and moving towards our potential. Call them the 4 Ps if you like. In this podcast, we regularly explore what it means to get quiet and face ourselves. We've spoken to monks, to meditators, to mindfulness practitioners, authors, and even entrepreneurs, many of whom share the same wise message about how to live a life. To quote the ancient Greek aphorism, it's this: know thyself. And who can possibly know themselves better, spiritually, mentally, and physically, than those athletes who spend hour after hour alone with just their thoughts and their bodies for company? I'm talking about the ultra athletes who go far beyond the already grueling challenge of the 26.2 miles of a marathon and instead push themselves for hundreds of miles for days and days of solitude and physical exertion. What does it take to push yourself to those kinds of extremes? What do you learn about yourself and the world along the way? And what can we learn from these individuals who are pushing the envelope of what's possible for the human body and the human psyche that we can apply to our own more modest exertions day to day, as we try to find our path through the tangled undergrowth of life? I spoke to Kieran Alger, journalist and ultra-runner, who regularly pushes himself and his body beyond what most of us would consider to be possible. I spoke about what it takes to go ultra, and what we learn about ourselves and our place in the world along the way. You can follow Kieran's adventures on his blog, www.manvmiles.co.uk, on Instagram and Twitter at manvmiles, and also check out his new YouTube channel, Run Testers, where he and other runners test out the best and the worst running kit, so that you don't have to. This is a 2-part podcast on ultra running. Next week I'll be speaking with photographer Amanda Eatwell, who just completed her first ultramarathon, to get another perspective on this challenge. And before we get started, just a shout out to our friends at Headliner. Headliner is the service that I use to promote this podcast. I use it to create waveform graphics that I share to social media. I'm sure you've seen what I'm talking about. Headliner is by far the easiest and most powerful way to make them, so if you host a podcast, check it out. It's at www.headliner.app. And also a quick shout out to international publicist Kieran Black. Kieran is another supporter of the podcast and a previous guest on the show. She's the founder of talentfinders.com and is offering a publicity and PR bootcamp designed to help you become more visible, increase your influence, and make more impact. It's a 3-week online training course that covers everything from interview preparation to leveraging the power of the media and using publicity for personal branding, all designed to help you move your public profile to the next level. Find out more about Kieran at www.kieranblack.com, and if you're interested in the bootcamp, send her an email to kieran@talentfinders.com. That's Kerrin. She'll also be on the show in about 2 episodes' time to talk about this and also about how we can all use PR and a bit of personal branding to help us spread our message. And don't forget, wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate and review. And tell all your friends, your brothers and your sisters, tell the postman. It all helps to get the word out there and spread the love. And if you want to find out more about previous episodes of this podcast, head over to conversationsonliving.com, where you can also find information about me and my writing. And while you're there, you can sign up to my incredibly infrequent email newsletter and grab a copy of my most recent book, Shine Manifesto, for free. And if you want to discuss any of the ideas that come up in this podcast, head on over to our Facebook group where the Combo crew are all hanging out. Just search for Conversations on Living. Now, time to get our running shoes on and race into my conversation with the inspiring ultra runner and writer, Kieran Alger. So, Kieran, thank you for coming on the podcast. We go back. Well, it's been a while since we've spoken, but we studied journalism together back in 1999, wasn't it? So it's
pre-internet.
Yeah, pre-internet, pre-cars, stuff like that. So
no social media,
nothing like that. And I got into writing about all that kind of stuff, writing about Facebook and all that kind of stuff, and then went off on my career trajectory. And I've been kind of following you from a distance because you're an ultra runner and you've made a kind of a career out of ultra running. You also write about it and you have various projects about it. But I'm a keen follower of people like Rich Roll and stuff like that, and fascinated by these kind of hardcore endurance events that mad people like you do. So just as a bit of background, if you could explain to anyone who's listening what ultra running is and what ultra marathons are and how you got into it, why you stick at it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. I guess ultra running kind of really is anything, it's kind of classified as anything beyond 26.2. So that's the distance of a standard marathon. So anything beyond that is technically an ultra runner, sort of an ultra marathon. But really what you're talking about are people who are going up to kind of 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. And then you start to open up this world of various different types of ultra running, everything from sort of heading to the mountains and doing these kind of mountainous 100-milers, like the most famous race is called the UTMB, the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc. So 100 miles takes people up to kind of 46 hours to complete it. Or people go further afield. They might go to various sort of deserts around the world and do multi-stage ultras where you're running, perhaps the equivalent of a marathon a day for, 6 or 7 days with some kind of longer stretches in that. They might run across the Atacama, or you can even go, you can go hot or you can go cold. But essentially what you're doing is sort of pushing yourself beyond your kind of comfortable kind of limits. And I know for some people that would be, a marathon pushes, a 5K can push somebody, but this is something where you're often sort of going sort of way beyond. A lot of them are self-sufficient. So you might be sort of carrying your own kit, or you have to carry your own food. Some of them, I guess, are supported. So you'll have aid stations along the way. But whereas in a marathon, you might get somebody handing you a cup of water every 5 kilometers. When you're doing an ultra, there can be 10 miles between a station. So you're talking more about sort of logistics and, controlling your environment as well. So carrying your own water, bringing enough food, having, obligatory kit in case something goes wrong and you're cold. But the idea really here is that you're sort of stretching sort of far beyond. Another one to give a really good example of the levels of craziness you can go to is there's a race called the Self-Transcendence Race. It's a 24-hour race on a 400-meter running track. Now, there are various ones of these, but there's a famous one in London called Self-Transcendence. And yeah, people just doing loops of a 400-meter track for 24 hours. Some people will run 100 miles or more. Every so often, someone rings a bell and you run back the other way in the loop. So you don't, going around the bends, you even out the legs. But, the whole point of that race, it's designed to make people go through something, that they haven't been through before and see how they get out the other side. It's about pushing yourself into that real moment of struggle. And I think that's really, in essence, really, that's kind of a big part of what ultra running is. There's also, with lots of them, they're in beautiful environments. So it's about going to places that you might not normally be able to reach in other ways. If you went walking, hiking, it might take you 7 days to get to some of the places that you can cover off in a day ultra running.
I mean, there is a marathon that I've heard about, and you talk about beautiful environments and places you might not go to visit. And there's one in France. I don't know what it's called, but you go from vineyard to vineyard and you just drink wine as you go along. And that sounds like my kind of marathon. But 7 marathons across 7 days in the Sahara Desert. does not sound like my kind of marathon. That's because I remember reading, and I think it was you. You said that there was a point where you did that, the Marathon des Sables across the Sahara, and there was a point where you were running, and I don't know how long you've been running for, but you were crying and puking at the same time, and you kind of have to ask yourself why would you want to do that and put yourself through that?
Well, I guess, you're going to, it's really about discovering what you can overcome, I think. I mean, you don't go into a race hoping that that's going to happen. You want to, the idea is that it sort of splits into two parts of this. One part is, I'm quite a goal-driven person, always have been. And I like the idea of working towards something over a period of time. So, the training and the preparation and working out what foods I can eat and how I'm going to carry my kit. And does that jacket do the job I need it to do? Can I make my kit lighter? All of these things. And the process of getting ready for the race is a big part of it. I enjoy that. It kind of keeps me motivated and fit before the race. And then the second part of it is actually when you kind of arrive on the start line. And then you enter into this, for somebody I'm an over prepper, I'm a fusser and what I call a pratter. And we're sort of fiddling and fussing even right up to the beginning of the race. And then you're thrown out into this world where you can't control anything, really, or you can control sort of less. So you don't know how hot it's going to be on second day in the Sahara Desert. You don't know, it's actually, sometimes there's been rain there. You don't know how cold it's going to be at night when you're in these open-sided tents. So you take a sleeping bag, for example, that is lightweight, so you don't carry so much weight, but before you go there, you're not sure if you're going to be cold in the evening. And then you get sort of thrown into these different sort of moments where you have to basically learn to cope. And you have to almost learn to not try and control everything, but to essentially roll with the punches. And it tests you in a way. And I think it frees me up a little bit from that feeling like I really want to make everything perfect. Because it never goes, when you're running 100 miles or you've got 7 days like that stretched out in front of you, there's lots of things are going to go wrong. They will be different from race to race to race to race. So you have to learn how to respond correctly and build kind of the psychological strength to not crumble when something big or small goes wrong. The funny thing, Chris, is it can be a tiny thing can kind of break you as well.
Yeah.
You get a leak in a bottle, you accidentally spill some water down your, I've run with bags where I've had a whistle as obligatory kit and it just flaps and bounces on the shoulder of your bag and I couldn't tuck it away anywhere. So for 12 hours, I've just got this little thing tapping, tap, 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 tap. And by the end of it, it drives you nuts. But, there's all these little things that challenge you.
And I can imagine that after that section is run and you're lying in bed, you can probably still hear it tapping, just going around in your head, this kind of psychological torture, if you like. But it's interesting what you're saying. It's like you don't get to this level of fitness without kind of knowing yourself, knowing kind of, okay, I'm going to be out there for 7 days, or I'm going to be out there for 60 miles or whatever it is. And I know that I'm going to need, at some point, I'm going to need to drink water. I'm going to need to take supplements or whatever it is. Is it that it's almost like an addiction to finding out more about yourself, to kind of, Nietzsche said, don't look into the void because the void might look back into you. Is that the kind of the game you're playing? You're kind of like seeing how far can I push myself and how far can I go before I snap?
I guess a little bit, yeah. And I have snapped. I have races that I've not finished, and I've been to some quite dark places that I haven't overcome the challenge. In the sense of getting to a finish line, that's always a bit of a sort of testing moment, because there was a period of time when I went from being a marathon runner to an ultra runner, and every race I went to, I finished. Every challenge I set, I completed. All my family were. We had a thing we would say was never give up. And that was something that we'd always sort of have this mantra. And then one race I remember, it's a race I always talk about, with the Lavaredo. It's 120 kilometers in the Dolomites in Italy, about 10,000 meters of climbing. It's a tough race. I wasn't really ready for it. And I quit after about 24 hours or 25 hours of running. And I remember my 6-year-old nephew was in the car in the back, and he said to my sister, who was also there, he said, I thought we sort of said never give up. And he said, well, he did. And, but you, and I guess so you're kind of trying to push to that edge and find out something about yourself. But I think, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that it's such an escape. So if you think about when you're out, you don't really have any contact with the world, and you have maybe 20, let's say you run a 24-hour race, you've got 24 hours of just your own thoughts, and it's a complete release from everything. And yes, in that there is going to be this point where you're testing to find out what you're made of. You're trying to see how you respond, but there's also just like a blessed relief in it. I've spoken to a lot of ultra runners who say, they look forward to the weekends where they're doing these races because it's isolation. So there's a big part of that in it as well. But the psychology of it, there's definitely an addictive side to it, I think. Again, if you ask a lot of ultra runners what happens when they get back on the Monday after they've done a race, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you start searching around for the next race to go and sign up for, because you want that feeling again. It's quite a powerful sort of combination of that time on your own to think and process, that idea that you're pushing yourself, and whether you overcome or you sometimes come up short, you learn. And then you also have this kind of moment at the end of it where perhaps you've got your family with you, or there's a moment of absolute sort of joy at what you've done. And it's a real sort of cocktail that's quite a powerful thing, I think.
I did a photo shoot with Sean Conway. I don't know if you know Sean. He is he's an adventurer. He likes to go out, and I don't know what he's done. He's like swum the entire coast of England, and he's done these incredibly long runs around the coast of England. And this is kind of what he does for a living now. But he said that he wanted to, I remember him saying, he said he wanted to run on a treadmill for 50 miles, just facing a white wall, to see what that would do to him and what kind of demons that would bring up from his kind of, inner psyche. And that's some pretty hardcore stuff. I mean, you have to know when you're going out there that I might have some unresolved issues here that might come up and, give me a bit of a visit while I'm out, miles from anywhere, 10 hours into this crazy race.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily, going into this in the same way as that, I guess I don't necessarily have expectations of using it to kind of process something, or, and that idea of sort of staring at a blank wall sort of fills me slightly with dread. I mean, I know it's something that people who do Ironman training, I've spoken to kind of sort of world champion Ironman triathletes, and they do a lot of work on the turbo trainer in their in their pain caves, as they call them, and some of them deliberately don't have any stimulus around in order to gain that. It's about sort of building up that mental toughness so that when they go and compete and all of a sudden they're in somewhere beautiful in France, it's a bit easier. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there are definitely people who deliberately go into it to process things, I think, and stare down big demons. And I guess ultra running will be full of stories where people are coming into it from places where their personal lives haven't necessarily been great. People struggle with addiction, or they've had broken marriages or broken relationships. And this is something that they've used to almost process that whole episode.
I mean, it would be easier, I suppose, just to learn to meditate to a degree, and then you can just sit and chill out while you're doing it, instead of going out in all kinds of weather and all that kind of stuff.
I've tried really? Actually, and it's fascinating you say that, because I've tried and I find it very difficult to do that. I mean, I know, and it is this. So when I get out there, there's a meditative side to the runs for sure that I find. It's almost, I thought about it actually the other day when I was doing the 7 marathons in 7 days around London. It sort of came into mind, am I actually meditating really with this? Because I always feel like I should meditate, but I'm not. I can't get my head into it. Maybe I should let myself off the hook, because I'm probably doing it. But
yeah, I think though, I mean, going out for 24 hours and having no contact with someone else, that's got to be meditative. And I know meditation comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And some of it's about, silencing the mind. But then other types of meditation, it's about just sitting with those thoughts and then just letting them do their thing, and sit there for an hour every day for 60 days or whatever, and just let it, come and go. And then by the time the brain has done its processing, then it's kind of like, right, I've dealt with all the admin. Now let's see what's going on deeper underneath, And I suppose when you're on day 6 of a 7-day marathon across the Sahara, you're at that point where you're just alone with this, your own kind of awareness, if you like, your sense of kind of, and you must have a very different relationship with your body than most people have as well. There must be, I suppose, when you're in that space where you've been going for a long time, you probably disconnect, I should imagine, your kind of mental state from your physical state to a degree.
As much as you can, particularly when it starts to hurt, or you have things that are painful. We get blisters, or in the desert. I remember, there's lots of the sand people sort of talk about in the desert being the bad thing, but actually you're running across kind of these what are essentially sort of dried up riverbeds of rocks, fist-sized rocks, and you kick them all the time. So just carrying bashed up toes. And I remember in the desert one time, smacked my toe and it was throbbing, and you have to sort of learn to let that go, and sort of you can sort of tamp it down in a way, that pain. And after a while it goes. When you stop, it comes back, or what happens often is the thing will rotate around. So just the worst thing you can do is be running in an ultra and go and look inside yourself and go, I feel great, this is going really well, and think that this is going to be the way it's going to be for the next 16 hours. Because just after that thought happens, something in your body will twinge or grumble or moan, and then they seem to sort of take turns in kind of whinging at you. So you might, and a lot of it's this amazing sort of thing where you sort of learn that everything passes, the good bits pass, the bad bits pass. Pain, when you've stopped at an aid station to sit down and eat something, pain comes back when you first start moving. After 15 minutes, it disappears again. It's fascinating.
It's funny, you said earlier before we started recording that the last 6 miles of any long race, whether it's a marathon or whatever, are always the worst. But I mean, how do you find the very start of a race when you still haven't kind of loosened up? Is that the time where you're kind of thinking, actually, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I'm only a mile in and my legs are so stiff and my ankles are killing me. I mean, presumably you're prepared for those kind of thoughts when you go into it.
Yeah, I think I've learned over time that you have to approach the start with caution and run knowing, you have to go into it knowing that you're going to be in this, it's a long day, whether it's a marathon or you're doing an ultra marathon. This first few miles don't really count. You've got to ease yourself into it, and you will go through lots of different feelings depending on how your preparation's gone, depending on how well you slept the night before, depending on whether or not you feel like you had the right breakfast. And all of these things come into play when you're looking at 100 miler. So I did 100 miler along the Thames, and you're going to be out there for minimum 24 hours. It's really important just to take those first miles, try and get your eyes open wide, sucking in the environment, see what's around you, and just not be thinking about time or watch, or if you start to get on the numbers too soon like that and start to think about what might go wrong, it can become a very, very long day very quickly. So you almost have to and this is where the meditation comes in, you just have to be in the footstep that you're in a way. It's like that, you have to go into the moment, otherwise it all feels too big.
I mean, I suppose that's the problem when you do find yourself kicking rocks, because you're trying to get into that rhythm, and you're trying to get into that kind of meditative, almost therapeutic rhythm, I guess. But then you kick a rock and you're like, and it snaps you out of it, and it's like, oh God, here I am again, slugging away. Then you try and get that back, and you can't quite get it back, and then it becomes torture, I guess. But presumably you haven't always run these kind of great long runs. Do you remember when you first started out, when you were doing sort of shorter runs, maybe 10Ks or something like that? What was your attitude to running like back then? I mean, were you still kind of thinking, I'm going to run ultras one day?
I didn't get into running to thinking that I would ever run an ultra, to be honest. I was a footballer, and in football training, it was always a bad night when the coach would come over and say, "You can put the balls away tonight, guys, because we're not going to need those." Pre-season, so you'd be doing, you'd just be running, and that was always, my kind of worst bit. And then I did a 10K around London. I ran past Big Ben, House of Parliament, beautiful blue skies, just as Big Ben chimed close to the finish, lots of crowds. And I just remember that moment. It was like a beautiful Sunday morning. It must have been like an April, like a spring, lovely clear skies. And I just thought I looked around and I thought, this is an experience that I'd like to have again. So I went home and I signed up for a half marathon around London, sort of similar route. I did that. When I crossed the line of my first half marathon, I thought, there's no way, I don't really understand how anyone could ever do double that or want to do double that distance and go and do a marathon. But I'm going to go and find out why. So I went back that day and signed up for a marathon. And I remember it being, I distinctly remember it being tough. It's and I can, it's everything is relative. I have this kind of this sort of saying when people ask me about this, or some people will come up and say, "Oh, I don't know how you do it," and they sort of almost put themselves down in comparison to what you do. And I'm like, well, every goal is equal. Your 1 mile that you've just run off the sofa for the first time is the same as my 100 miles. It's all relative, and I've just built these blocks along the way. And I can remember it being hard, to get around that first 10K. I remember it being super tough to get around the first half marathon. The next day I couldn't, walk downstairs like everybody. First marathon, I was done. I didn't think I was going to do anything more than that. It was one of those, everyone wants that achievement, having it on their, it's on their bucket list. I was standing outside after I did the Paris Marathon was my first. I was standing outside a pub with a friend who ran with me and a friend of his who I'd never met. And his mate turned to me, and I actually had a pint and a cigarette at the time, a Victory cigarette. And I was done marathon running, and he said, "You can go faster." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, you can, that's a good run today, but you can go faster than that." And I'll never forget that penny. He basically dropped that penny, and I was like, "Okay, I fancy having a go at that." And then it kind of went from there. At the same time, I had an opportunity through work. So being a journalist, I realized that there was a good amount of storytelling to be done around these races and about the kind of things that we're talking about now. I got the opportunity to set myself a challenge of then going to run trying to do all the different types of ultras that there were. So do a mountain race, do a track race, do a 100K, and I wrote about it. And from that's where it all kind of it came from. Really, I just got into it and became, I guess, addicted is probably not too strong a word. Really, it's just become part of my lifestyle now.
Do you find that you're kind of almost like you're chasing something, like you're chasing this sense of kind of better or faster or further, and that you're almost running away from that kind of giving up? It's like, if I keep going, I can prove that I am good enough or fast enough, or, will there come a day where you just go, "Yeah, I'm done now"? Or do you think there'll always be this hunger?
There might. And I think it's a really interesting, because running, I read a great book by Richard Asquith, and he talks about like 7 stages of running. And in it's a bit like, to take a riff on sort of Shakespeare's, 7 stages of life, and or 7 ages of man. But he talks about, when you first start out, that you're all about times and you're about running fast and training hard and trying to, constantly cut down on your times. And then as you sort of progress, you get to this stage where it becomes less about that, maybe because you get a bit older and you can't run those times anymore. But also, I think probably because you realize there's more to it than that. There's more to be gained from the process of the runs than always having your head down or looking at a watch. And you start to realize, actually, if I get my head up and look around, I take a bit more time to enjoy the process of this, that it's more enriching. There's a whole lot more to it. And I think I've reached that stage where, I've started to do less races and I've started to go out and do more things on my own. So I'll stick a backpack on and I might go and run I ran with a friend around the Isle of Wight in 2 days, so 70 miles in 2 days. No race, just enjoyed. We had more time to be in the kind of environment and just enjoy the challenge. But there's still the element of it, which is, can I do that? And absolutely, I think you've nailed on the head. I think there's definitely something. You're always trying to prove something to yourself. Am I trying? If I'm really honest, am I trying to prove something to other people? Probably as well, a little bit. Yeah.
It's interesting. Like you talked about that one race called Transcendence. It's that transcendent race. And for me, I do have some demons I'm trying to iron out to do with kind of a failure. I'm feeling like a failure. Whenever I've had an achievement, there's always been a caveat at the end. Like I did the London Marathon, but it was a really rubbish time. I've published books, but nobody's read them. All these kind of little caveats. And then I thought to myself, well, I'm not getting any younger, and so I'm going to just try and do something and do it really well and prove to myself that if I really apply myself, I can get it done. So I've just kind of set this goal: marathon under 4 hours, and it doesn't matter how long it's going to take me to get there. I'm just going to pick away at it, and just I've got the Reading half marathon coming up in 2 weeks' time. Although I think it will have just gone by the time we publish this, and it's just proving to myself that actually, I'm worthy of taking up space here. But this whole transcendence thing, it feels like a sense of really being present in the world. Here I am, my spirit, my body, and the world that I live in, and it's just us. It's just me in this moment. My painful feet, my blisters. Is there a sense of kind of searching, man's search for meaning, if you like, this connection with, well, whatever it is, the world that we live in, the universe, something a bit more spiritual, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't sort of classify myself as a spiritual person, really, but I do think this is probably how I'm kind of fulfilling that probably need that everybody has. And there are absolutely moments that you probably, the way that I might describe them or the way that I might write about them, you'd probably look at them and go, they're sort of spiritual moments. And that you sort of seek out. So when I did the 7 and 7, I'd get up at 6 and I was going out, and I was pretty much in West London. There wasn't many other people out at that point, but I was seeing these couple of more. I got these glorious sunrises over Hammersmith Bridge that I felt like were mine. No one else there, and I'd earned them because I'd gone out early. No one else had gone out early, and they just, but they're these moments that stop you, and they sort of, I don't know, there is a connection. There's a feeling like you've connected with the world in a way that maybe other people haven't, and there's something special about that. You also, it's why I quite enjoy doing ultra runs that you start in the evening. You might start at 11 o'clock and run through the whole following day, because you go through this kind of dark night. 3 o'clock in the morning is the worst, because your circadian rhythms are trying to make you go to sleep, and it's just the most miserable part. And then at some point the light starts to rise, and I've been lucky enough on some to go through races where I've been having a horrible time. I had one in the Pyrenees where, if at the first stop I would have gone home if there would have been a coach, but because we were in the middle of the mountains at the aid station, they're like, well, there's no other way to get out of here other than run to the next one. So I had to keep going. At the next aid station, another mountain hut, they're like, well, there's no buses here or roads here, so you've got to go to the next one. So I struggled through this sort of horrible time. And then just as the sun came up, I topped a mountain, one of the highest climbs, and it just flipped a switch in me. I was like, for the first time in about 8 hours, I had a reason for being there. And it was that I'd been given this moment, I'd been, given this sort of wonderful sunrise with a wonderful view. And everything kind of clicked, and you felt like you belonged, and after that, it's really interesting because the body sort of freed up. I relaxed, and there are lots of those moments that I do think, I would probably classify as quite kind of spiritual experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Dante's Inferno. I don't know if you know it, and I haven't read it, but I kind of know the basic storyline. The main character has to keep going deeper and deeper into hell, and he keeps going through all these different circles of hell, and it gets worse and worse and more hellish as he goes down. But eventually he comes through into paradise, and the only way into paradise is to go through that hell. I mean, maybe that's what it's all about. Maybe that's why people do these horrific runs and put themselves to the test, because that sense of achievement, or that kind of sense of accomplishment, and saying, yeah, I'm good at something, or I am, better than I was yesterday, or whatever it is, and look at
Yeah.
this glorious sunrise in front of me at the same time.
I would totally agree. I think it's interesting because the races, you have to have the struggle. Actually, the struggle is, I've learned this sort of over the years, that the reason that you kind of go there is to confront the struggle. It's you want to have sections of these races where you're running free, and you feel it kind of one and in the zone, and things aren't hurting. But part of the point of it is the struggle. So the race I mentioned called the Laborator that I didn't finish, it was the first race that I had what they call a DNF, it's that I did not finish. And I remember being on the longest climb of that race, which was like a 4.5 hour hike up a mountain. And every 20 meters, I was having to sit on a rock because my heart rate was hitting 180. And I was just thinking, I was so angry. I was angry at myself for, why would you put yourself in this position? You're a road runner, really. You're not really a mountain runner. You've overshot the mark. You've been too ambitious. I hated myself going up that hill until I got to the top, and I kind of knew that I was going to quit. I knew I had to make it to the top of that climb because it was the biggest climb. And I said to myself, I'm not going home from this race without completing the biggest climb. If I feel the way I feel at the top, I can go home, knowing that at least I've done that. But I hated myself on that mountain. I nearly sort of fell asleep at one point, but I sat there, just watched out the runners go past. And I was looking in their faces for a glimmer of something, a smile,
yeah, you can anything. Do it. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, just something from both of us to get us both sort of moving. And all of them walked past me like they were the living dead. No one could muster a smile. And I was just sat there thinking, this is ridiculous. What is this all about? This isn't me at all. This is no good. I now realize, looking back after I've done other things, and I've been to darker places than that was the reason I went. And I needed to be prepared better for that moment to happen. And I was actually moving okay. I thought I was doing badly. Actually, when I look back now, I realize I was running, or I was moving quite well. And had I just persevered a bit more, I would have pushed through that bit, and good times would have come. I probably would have made it to the end. I only had sort of 20 kilometers to go. But it takes you've got to learn, I think along the way, you have to learn that there's bits that actually, if you just push a little bit further through, you can do it.
I think that's really, like, there's something in there that I think we all face one way or another, because we all struggle. Life can be pretty hard sometimes, but often we don't have a frame of reference, because we're looking on social media, everyone's smiling and they've just bought a new car, they've got a big house. You don't see that the struggle is part of life. And certainly in running, you have these things that beat you, and you need to be beaten that time, because then you'll know what it needs, what you need to bring next time. And then, I mean, with that one that you didn't finish, did you kind of know before you went into it that you hadn't prepared well enough, or did you think, I'm going to ace this?
I think because I'd come back, it was after I'd finished the Marathon des Sables, so I was feeling I did really well in the Marathon des Sables. I was fit, and I just thought I would be okay at this race, and it took me by surprise because it's different. At the MDS, it's the longest climb, and there may be sort of 20 minutes. You're not talking. This is in the mountains. It's a different kind of running, where you're faced with something that you're hiking up, thousands of meters in one stint, and it was a real test, because a lot of it you're not moving very freely, and I was getting angry at the kind of race, at the race itself, like this isn't running, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. And yeah, I mean, maybe I wasn't prepared in as much as I didn't know what that race would require of me necessarily. I was fit and I was strong. I made a few mistakes, Now I know what that race requires. It's still on my list to go back, and I've had a second go at it, and for different reasons I didn't finish it either. Interestingly, I found myself on that same climb, hating myself even more the second time because I was on the first time I swore that I would never put myself in that position again. The second time, there I am back in that position again, knowing that I'm probably going to drop out again, and that was quite a hard place to be. But it's all part of it, and it's that race is still there, and I will go back and I will get it done. And that in a way, I sort of, if I'd have breezed through it and got it done the first time, it would be less rewarding, I feel, in the long term. And I'm looking forward to the day when I do cross that line, I have completed that race, because I think the failure is going to be a big part of how good it feels to finish it.
It's going to be like your Moby Dick, isn't it? You're going to just, vengeance will be yours one way or another.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, I remember when Andy Murray won Wimbledon, and he said, winning doesn't feel as good as losing feels bad. I mean, do you ever kind of get to an end of a race and go, I've done it. Now what? Where's that sense of kind of, yeah, this is amazing?
Yeah, some of them.
Does it just get very normal, to finish yet another race?
So sometimes you can be very fatigued, and you don't always get the sense of achievement immediately when you're crossing the line. I think in the days after, you always have this kind of post-run kind of feeling that you get. And there are definitely marathons that I've done now. So I've done about 43 marathons, and some of the races, they haven't really felt like a huge achievement, mainly because I haven't really been running for a time goal necessarily, or I haven't really gone into it as in the right condition that I would like, or it's not been somewhere that's particularly, nice to run. But so there are moments. I think I'm not quite like Andy Murray. I mean, in terms of that idea of defeat, because take, for example, the Labrador that I didn't finish the first time. When I dropped out of that race, I'd run for the furthest and the longest I'd ever run. Or sorry, the longest in terms of duration, so the number of hours on my feet. So when I get back to the hotel, I mean, I was very happy to be sat with a pizza and a beer and not out in the rain that came. But I had to sort of, the following days, I had to kind of reconcile myself and sort of say, well, look, actually, that's such a huge achievement to run for that long. Anyway, and that's still something positive to take away. And that is a very, very important thing out of all of this. Every single run that I do, I try and find a positive. And there are always lots of positives in there. And you build on that, you take away those things, and then you sort of try and work out why some of the things didn't go right and fix them if you can. But they're always positive, no matter how, you talk to me about your disappointment at sort of a 5.5 hour marathon, but crossing a marathon finish line the first time is just an absolute achievement in its own right. Doesn't matter how long you take. And
yeah, this is true. I mean, I always, because I've got this goal I'm working towards, but where I live is quite, I probably wouldn't call it hilly by your standards, but it's undulating, certainly. And I'm not, I manage to get out twice a week if I'm lucky. Normally it's like one time will be a 5K in my lunch break, and then I'll try and do something longer at the weekend. So it's not like a really formal running plan. But there's a particular hill, and every time I'd run up it, I'd have to stop and walk. And then one day I managed to get to the top, and I ran all the way. And that was just like, I'm getting better. I'm getting better. This is amazing. I'm getting better. And just that level of satisfaction. I think it was only 2K into the run, so it's not even like I'd gone very far, but it always beaten me. And until that point, and now I kind of breeze up it, but it was like that. It was kind of like such a kind of encouraging feeling, and a sense of kind of, hey, actually, maybe I'm not as bad at this as I thought.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's partly why lots of people do it. And whether you're an ultra runner or you just go and run regularly every day and do your sort of 5K loop, I think that's part of it. Is that's kind of self-reinforcement every day when you've done it. There's always a feeling of, you've always beaten that doubt, which is, can I get out the front door for a start? And it sounds like a small thing, but it's huge. I mean, today I procrastinated. I didn't actually go out for a run today. I should have. So even though I've got years of experience of doing it, I still have that thing where it's like, come on, you've got to get out and go and do it. And that's an achievement in itself, just lacing up and going out. So I definitely think there's a positive to come from all the runs that you do.
Yeah, I remember my dad, he ran the first London Marathon and did a series of them after that. And he always used to say the hardest part is getting out the front door. And it's that kind of psychological, getting that inertia going. And I recently took 3 weeks off to try and heal the iliotibial band inflammation. I haven't done that very well, but you probably have had many of those.
Yeah, I know that well.
No, but for 3 weeks I was there itching to get out and run, but I knew I had to just leave it alone. But then when it came to actually get out there and finally run, because I'm doing the half marathon in a couple of weeks, even for 5K, I felt a bit reluctant to get out there. I thought maybe it'd be easier just to stay at home, and you kind of lose that kind of psychological push to do it.
It's a habit as well. It is definitely, there's momentum as well with it as well. And I really like, someone once said to me that people always go looking for, I need motivation. Where's my motivation? And the fact is that it's motivation doesn't lead to action. Action leads to motivation.
Yeah.
And the best way to find the motivation to do it is to get out. And then interestingly, I always find, once you get into that 2 or 3 days, all of the things that you feel are a problem, have I got the right kit? Is it cold? Is it raining? Have I got the time? Those things sort of start to become easier because you're into the moment of it. And it's even now, it's very easy for me. So I've just 3 weeks ago finished those 7 marathons in 7 days. And obviously I had to rest, but now I've had those 3 weeks off. I'm struggling myself to get back into that rhythm. And, again, I think there's a big part when you have to be gentle with yourself. If it's taught me one thing as well, generally in life, it's that you have to be kind to yourself, and it's kind of okay. I'll get back into it. I know I will, and I don't beat myself up about it. And the days that I don't run like today, I don't worry, because I know I will be back in that rhythm. And if you take the pressure off yourself like that, I think is a really important lot for beginner runners or people who maybe are trying to find the habit. Remove all the pressure as much as possible. Don't sweat it if you miss a day or miss a couple of days. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I did. Oliver Berkman was a guest on the podcast, and he is all about kind of optimizing your routine and productivity and stuff like this. And he talks about doing stuff daily-ish, or weekly-ish, and just giving yourself that little bit of flexibility to, if today you're not feeling it, then don't do it, but just get back on the horse tomorrow, and that kind of thing. I mean, I suppose there has to be a certain amount of discipline, but it's getting that balance right, and feeding the hunger as well. Do you find that whole idea about action leading to motivation useful in other areas of your life? Do you apply it? Do you ever kind of come up with a writing job that you're kind of like thinking, oh God, I can't do this, but hang on, I'll just get into it. I'll get writing and get it done.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, it's very much with writing. There are some things that you could always put it off until the moment of pressure comes with the deadline looms, and all of a sudden, you haven't got any choice but to put words on a page. But if you try and bring that forward and you just sort of say, okay, well, if I'm not quite sure how I'm going to frame this piece, I'm not quite sure, but just start doing something, and inevitably it will help you get into that flow. I find, particularly with longer features, things that you're maybe a little bit more complicated to write. Absolutely. The other thing I've also found that running has helped me with in crossover into sort of normal life. I know you've got a young 3-year-old, Chris, and I've got a 6-year-old, and it definitely helped me be a better parent, or at least it helped me parent better, I guess, myself, or deal with being a parent, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's sort of cope with what it throws at you in those early years. There would be lots of times when, I was sat on the floor of a bedroom and you've got a screaming sort of 2-year-old who won't go to sleep, or and it's 4 a.m, whatever, all through those kind of sleepless bits. And I was quite often would just tell myself, well, you're not halfway up that mountain in the middle of the night, are you? So it's much more, it's warm, you're comfortable, there are lots of other places that you've been, and in points of suffering that are way beyond what's happening to you right now. And also that it's the interesting thing about when ultras is all of those things that in terminal kind of boredom or time stretches, it shrinks a little bit. So for me now, like 3 hours is not a long time, interestingly. So sitting with a screaming child, I can be patient.
Yeah.
I can be calm. I can sort of know that this is something that will pass. Long train journeys, car rides, all those kind of things. It's really interesting. I'm not so bothered by them anymore. Before, the idea of being in a car for 5 hours would be horrible, but now it seems easier. I don't know.
It's interesting. I used to work as a carer with a variety of people with different disabilities, and there was one chap who had a spinocerebellar ataxia. I worked with him for about 3 years. He was a lovely guy, but it kind of presents itself in the same way as motor neurone disease. And he had to use this little kind of box where he would type very slowly, and then it would speak on his behalf. And as he kind of progressively got worse, his ability to use the box quickly got worse as well. And it'd be very interesting to watch him trying to speak to other people, because he would sort of say a few words and they would try to finish his sentence for him, because they were impatient and they wanted to kind of get to the bottom of it. But I learned very quickly about just the power of I think there's a difference between waiting and being patient. I think when you're being patient, you can sit there for as long as it takes, but when you're waiting, there's this kind of like, come on, got to get through it, come on, get to the end. And I suppose that's that being able to be patient is a superpower, whether you're dealing with a child who can't sleep, is upset about something, and whatever you're trying isn't going to calm them down, or whether you're 3 hours into a 10-hour race. Just that kind of being comfortable with where you are right now, I think is a real skill.
Yeah.
As a long distance runner, you must really have that one nailed pretty much.
Yeah, because things go wrong, and I think that's what sort of part of what teaches you, things that you don't expect to go wrong. Your shoe might break. You might, you could drop a bit of your favorite food that you had in your pack. You drop it somewhere. You've forgotten to pack it, or at the aid station when you've stopped and you're switching over gear, you leave something, or there's all these moments that they can derail you psychologically, and you have to, all of a sudden you're running really, really badly, and there's nothing worse than when you start to move very slowly, really, and you can see the distance in front of you. You're thinking, oh my God, this is the pace that I'm moving at, this is going to be another 12 hours, and I really want it to be done within 3. And that moment, you have no choice, but because often, if you want to finish the race, you have no choice but to be patient. You have to sort of delete that thought or deal with that thought and switch your mentality and go, where else have you, it's okay. Where else have you got to be? And then you start to bring in techniques like, look around yourself. Where are you? Look at this beautiful environment. Try and find and tease out all the positives of the thing that's happened to you in that moment. And if you can do that, half up a mountain in snow, you can certainly do it when you're kind of sat in a warm bedroom with a child that won't sleep. You can just kick back and go, it's okay. We're all warm, we're all fed. This will be over at some point.
I remember I did a parachute jump, and they don't last very long. They're over very, very quickly, but they're also terrifying if you've never done one before. And I remember have you never done one? Well, I
would not do that.
You're strapped to a big surly man, and he kind of just pushes you out the plane. But there is a kind of a split second, like, I'm going to die right now, and then followed by, but I need to enjoy this moment because I've just paid 180 quid or whatever it is, and I need to kind of get the most out of this next 14 seconds. So there is a kind of like, okay, I'm going to die right now, but I need to just accept that and enjoy the view. And I've kind of recalled that kind of thought a few times where I've been in. I remember I had a boss who used to drive me to meetings, and she would drive like an absolute maniac, and I wasn't entirely convinced she knew what she was doing. And I used to recall that parachute jump, and it's like, I could die now, but you just got to let go and just go with it, and it's that same thing, that kind of letting go all the time. I saw that you and many other runners will write mantras on like your food packs and stuff like that. There are lots of little tricks that you have to play on yourself, just writing something like, you can do it, you're a hero, or something like that you can repeat over and over again. Do you come with like a toolkit of little tricks that okay, when I'm about 5 hours in, I'm going to have to start calling on the mantras. When I'm about 6 hours in, I'll look at the view or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, somebody I can't I forget. I was on a bus somewhere, and somebody said to me, you have to sort of work out what your why is for each of the races. Why you're doing it, and it helps to sort of bring somebody in. So one tactic I use, Chris, honestly, is when I do ultras in the UK, or even when I've taken them to Italy, my family come with me, and I have them there, and it's a blessing and a curse. Because if I don't finish, I feel sort of the failure is almost doubled down, but you have this impetus to move between aid stations. And you have these moments along the way where you see all the people that are closest to you. And those moments are magic. They're absolutely magic. And that becomes the why. I'm getting to that next point because I get to see my son or my wife or my sister or my mum, and I get a hug, and then we go on again, and we're almost doing it as a team. Not all ultra runners approach it that way. And as you get more serious in this, it's sort of done less, but it's one of the things that I've always used. And that there's other sort of smaller little sort of tactics and techniques that you can do. If you get grumpy, you start to have negative thoughts, and that grump starts to kick in. You're definitely either thirsty or hungry.
Yeah.
And so that, give yourself some food and some drink. And then there's like a checklist of things that I'll run through and see where I'm at, or take a moment. I'll stop. If I'm really feeling up against it, I'll stop and take a breath, look around. Just, again, it's all about going back to that idea of being kind to yourself. Give yourself a chance, don't keep hacking at it and go, I'm hating it. And you've just got to stop, breathe, eat, drink, and then go, okay, you're moving well, go again. That's one of the things that I will, guess, positive affirmations. I'll say, you're moving well. You're moving well. You're moving well. That's one thing that I will repeat. Music is a good one. Saving certain songs for certain places. I don't always listen to music on ultras because I find it's quite hard to get the right pace of music or the right kind of level. But then having something that if you're really struggling, you can whack on a single track that will kick you up that mountain. Yeah. So there's lots. There are good tactics. Talking to other runners around you is another one. It's really interesting because sometimes you'll remember them. You end up often with running with the same people. They're maybe sort of 20 paces ahead of you, and there's one person behind you. But and you develop this little relationship where they might stop for a bit, and you'll pass them, and then they pass you, and you sort of talk. And even though often you don't speak the same language, there's this kind of shared. You might hand each other bits of food, or you become part of this sort of chain. And that can drag you along as well. It's a really, really positive thing to use that to your advantage as well.
I saw when you did the 7 marathons in 7 days recently that finished with the London Marathon on the 7th day, but you were timing your runs to coincide with when your son was going to school so that you could run past his school and say good morning to him, which I thought was an amazing idea. And also, you must really know your pace and how fast you run and all that kind of stuff to be able to achieve that. That's amazing.
Yeah. It was a really nice. I had a rough idea. It gave me a reason to move with a certain intensity. It didn't matter if I didn't make it, but every morning I really wanted to make it, and that definitely gave me. Again, it's sort of that same idea of when I take my family and they're on the aid stations. It was a wonderful moment within that run that I look forward to every day. And then I knew I had 10 miles to go after I saw him, and having had a hug and said hello, it gave me the sort of emotional strength to go on and finish it off. And it made him part of it. And that's, just to go back to that sort of family point, it's been such an important part of why I do this. Often there are moments in a year around the races where my family get together when they don't often in other moments. So it sort of brings all these people together into this one thing, and we share the experience because I'm running, but they're on course. They get to see each other and hang out. I mean, they're doing their own particular challenge because they've got to drive between all the points, so they're tired and it's testing, and but you sort of go through it all together, and I love that because now when I look back and we talk about it, it's not just me, it's like we've done it as a family in a way, and it adds an extra layer to it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Do you think it's entirely healthy. I know it's good to be fit and everything, but I saw a picture of is it Courtney Dauwalter, who was the winner, the women's winner of the Trail de Mont Blanc, which is 106 miles around Mont Blanc, so it's up and down. And she put in, was it 22 hours it took her? But I saw this picture of her running, and she did not look happy, and she didn't look well, to be honest. Are you, for this kind of addiction, are you actually pushing your bodies too far? Are you kind of grinding those knees and pushing your heart, using up those heartbeats a little bit too quickly? What's the threshold for what the body can endure?
I think there's definitely some research that's being done on, still needs to be done. This is still relatively new, I guess, in terms of the mass sort of participation at ultra level and people doing these things. So there's not a huge amount of research about what the long-term effects. And yes, I think it's something that's up there about, what is this good for your heart, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things, if you go and I've had to have ECG tests in order to prove that I'm healthy enough to run in certain races like the Marathon des Sables. And actually, when you go and have that done, if I don't tell the doctor that I do ultra running, they almost certainly wouldn't let me do the race because you have abnormal patterns. It changes your kind of heart rhythms and stuff. So there is a bit of that. I think, I do wonder about what happens to the body when I get a little bit older. Am I loading on, too much strain? But then I think about the flip side to that. And if I was sat on the sofa, and I feel like I'm probably in a healthier position than I would be if I were at the other end of the spectrum, for sure. You've got to look. One of the things I will do, Chris, is I try and balance all of this with. I'm really optimal about my nutrition, about trying to, get my sleep right and do all of the other things that enable me to pursue this. And I try and be good to my body outside of the run. So one of the areas, I don't spend an awful lot of money on things. I don't buy a lot of stuff. What I do spend quite a lot of my sort of money on is food, and the right good quality food. I see that personally as kind of an investment in myself. I'm in a fortunate position where I can do that, but I'll invest in high quality food over going and buying sort of 6 or 7 pairs of jeans that I might only wear once.
It is fascinating because I've noticed as well with my own life, I suppose, the more you start to pay attention to the things that are kind of good for your energy, wherever you need to direct that, whether it's running or whatever. I pay attention to my sleep, and I pay attention to what I eat, how much I drink, and that kind of things. Sometimes I overindulge, especially at the weekends. But I know that it has an impact in other areas of my life. So if I get my sleep and I drink enough water, and I lay off the booze particularly, it'll make me better at making decisions later on. I'll be more confident in other areas and that kind of thing. And certainly your life has been transformed by running. And if you didn't have that running going on, you would, well, God knows where you'd be or what you'd be writing about and what you'd be doing right now, because pretty much everything you do is about running. And you've built a life around it. You've got the run testers as well, which is you and other runners. Is it just a YouTube channel, or do you write reviews as well?
At the moment, we just do video reviews, on YouTube. There's me and 3 other journalists.
And you're all tucking in. So you've basically created businesses around a passion, but it's not been, I suppose, just like building up to doing ultras. It's not something that happens overnight. How long has it taken you to get to this point where you kind of created your own life around a passion?
I would imagine it's almost run in complete parallel with my sort of running sort of journey. So maybe about 10 years, really. So interestingly, I was working at a technology magazine when I first started to run. And it was just at the point where wearable technology started to kind of appear. So the first ever Nike Fuel Band, the first step counters, Fitbits, all these kind of things started to come along. And in the magazine that I was working at, no one else was really running or testing them. And I decided that I would be the guinea pig for these things. And it kind of coincided with all the other sort of runs that I was doing and the challenge to sort of run all the different ultras. And so I started testing watches, and I would start testing, and then I started testing running shoes, and it just kind of came together. And, wearable technology saw a huge explosion. I think a lot of other areas of life started to have a technological angle in them. So even running shoes started to be quite kind of technology based, and that fitted with the magazine that I was working on at the time. And then on the side, I would just write a blog, and I'd tell stories about the runs that I did. And it just grew. Again, it was like, building blocks basically. And then, bit by bit, contacts grew, and I started to write about things that weren't technology, but were about running outside. So nutrition, I'd be testing nutrition for Runner's World, or I might do race reports and, turn my storytelling around kind of that way. And yeah, and it's just got to the point where now those two things sit kind of very much side by side. And I think, part of it, people respond to somebody who has a passion. So good example, if we're going to test one of these watches and it's got 140-hour battery life, people know that I will go and test it over, a long distance or whatever, and do it properly with passion. And hopefully it sort of comes through in the writing and in the videos that we make. And it feeds, the whole thing kind of feeds itself in a nice kind of cycle. There is potential negatives to it. I'm not going to be able to run. Well, I don't know. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to run. If I get injured, I can't test things, and my work becomes complicated. But it's been great because it's allowed me to be a bit creative as well in my writing, as well as doing sort of some functional stuff that's more around kind of reviews and what have you.
Was it a kind of organic thing that just kind of arose on its own, or was it that, okay, I'm really getting into this running now, and I would love to build something around that? Was there a kind of conscious effort to create this kind of running based career?
Not I guess not sort of fully strategically. I enjoyed everything that I was doing, and the more I enjoyed writing about this, the more I sort of took on those jobs. And then obviously the more those editors and other editors would sort of see me, and they from other magazines would come, well, could you want to review this, or do you want to test this, or do you want to do that race? Or so it kind of just, I guess it grew quite organically, but at the heart of it, there was me enjoying what I was doing, and I was happy for that to sort of flourish. I mean, I was an editor-in-chief of a magazine. I was going to be going up almost like the publishing chain. I was it was going away from writing to being spreadsheets and, management. And I have to say it was making me fairly miserable, and I was made redundant from that job. And at the same time, I then went freelance. And so those two things sort of collided as well. And it just felt like it all kind of happened at the right time.
Yeah.
And I was able to go with something that I was enjoying rather than, stick in a 9 to 5.
Yeah. Fantastic. Amazing.
But it's a trade-off. You don't get, I probably would have earned more money going up being the, head of content at somewhere or other. But yeah, I've got a very good life balance. When my son was born, I was able to, make this lifestyle work, and as much as I can spend much more time with him and do those things that are important.
I think everything is about trade-offs, isn't it? It's like I can do this, but I won't be able to do that, or I can do this, but I won't get the money, for example, or that kind of thing. But you talked about a blog, so you document your long runs. Where is your blog if people want to read about that?
So people can read blogs, my blog at manvymiles.co.uk. And I mean, I guess they can also follow me on Instagram. I'll often do, I'll report these things as I'm doing them on Instagram. Again, it's at manvymiles.
Fantastic. And you're pretty much all over the running press, so Runner's World and that kind of thing.
If you Google, running stuff of any kind, at some point down that list, you'll find me for one of the magazines or one of the websites. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what's your next big adventure? You've just done the 7 marathons in 7 days. What's coming up next?
I've got something that's a little bit top secret. The 7 in 7 was really a tester for next year. And I can't tell you where, but I'm going to go and try and do something that's never been done before. It will be a world first as far as I can find. It will be something like 68 marathons in 68 days.
Wow.
Self-supported.
Yeah.
but it's a biggie. So, sleeping wild, camping, those kind of things. But I'm planning it at the moment, and I'm hoping that, COVID willing, and if the stars align, that I'll be able to go and have a crack at that. But running 7 and 7 was my sort of taster to see how I can stack those runs together.
But it sounds both brilliant and horrific at the same time. So I'm sure good luck with that, however it ends up. But yeah, I think there's so many parallels in running that you can just apply to life. These philosophies about keeping going and, knowing yourself as well, knowing when you're going to feel like giving up. But, that's the time when you need to eat something or push through, or, whatever it is. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm going to listen back to this conversation and just pick out some really good philosophies that I can start applying. Not to my ultra marathons, I'm not quite there yet. I'm still trying to do my half marathon, but I wouldn't mind doing an Ironman one day.
I'd see ultra marathon's easier than Ironman.
Is it really?
Sure. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I've looked at Ironman and shied away so far. But
I don't know. A friend of mine does them, and she it's the swimming is the hard part for me, but she does the bike ride, and then they call it the run. They don't call it a marathon. They just say, and then we do the run, and it's like, wow. And she's out there for 12 hours, and I'm just thinking that's just insane. Why would you do that? But like you say, it's to kind of prove that you can, and that you're able to, and that kind of thing, and connect with yourself and with nature and whatever you need to connect to. So. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And I will put links to all your blog and to your social media and to your Facebook page. And also you do a big run at the end of the year, don't you, where you invite lots of people to come together and do a big long run together through London.
Yeah. It's called the Big End of Year Run. And it started as just two of us. It was the end of, I did a challenge to run a half marathon every day in December, way back about 7 years ago. And on the final day, I dragged someone else out to run we did a sort of sightseeing tour around London just to make it interesting. The following year, a few more friends came. The following year, more people came, and it spread. I think last year we had, not last year because of COVID, but the year before we had about 300 people. It's a wonderful way to get yourself ready for New Year's Eve, and also get a jump on the new year. You kind of go into the New Year's with a massive sense of positivity, having gone and been with all these people, chatted, run, blown away the Christmas cobwebs. And I didn't realize at the time, but we've just found this moment in the year that is magic. I get animated about it because everyone who comes buzzes about it. When afterwards we'll go and sort of chat and have a soft drink or a pint and whatever. But it's a really, really magical moment. We start at Marble Arch, but yeah, we'll get some links out, but anyone's welcome, basically.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, I will share all of this info in the show notes that accompany this. But in the meantime, I will leave you to your running and your family. And just thank you for your time and for the inspiration. I really appreciate it.
Great to chat. Thank you for having me on.
So there we go. So much to take away from that. And what a great conversation. We're so distracted, so busy being outraged, being entertained and consumed by the things around us, that when we finally get to meet the things within us, it can be a little bit bewildering and sometimes a bit frightening. But when we come face to face with ourselves and challenge our personal limitations, we can be surprised by just what we can achieve, what we can build, and how far we can push the boundaries of what we consider to be normal or even possible. A brilliant chat with an inspiring man. You can find out more about Kieran at www.manvmiles.co.uk. And don't forget to rate, review, subscribe and share this podcast. And if you want to continue the conversation, join the Facebook group. Just search for Conversation on Living. Next week, I'll be continuing this running-based two-parter with Amanda Eatwell, a photographer who recently completed her first ultramarathon, to get the perspective of a, in inverted commas, normal person. Find out more about this podcast and other conversations at conversationsonliving.com, along with my writing, my books, my meditations, and more. And in the meantime, have a lovely day.